Welcome to the launch of our second edition of the Solar Job Report. Thank you very much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, just recently, the new World Energy Employment Report of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, confirmed what we already knew. Solar creates more jobs than any other energy technology. And in these times of crisis, where we are all living a lot of uncertainty, we want to show today, with today's report, that solar indeed offers a reliable source of hundreds of thousands, and in the long run, even millions of not just reliable, but also local and green jobs. My colleagues will give you the details in a minute of the job report, but as a kind of a sneak preview, the solar sector provided more than 100,000 additional jobs in just 1 year. So from 2020 to 2021, additional 100,000 jobs. Solar employment in the EU increased by 30%. And we will be further growing as a solar sector, and so will also solar jobs. According to the European Commission's Repower EU plan, Europe should reach some 750 gigawatts of installed solar capacity by 2030. As a sector, we think we can do even more, and we're aiming at 1 terawatt of solar with the right policy frameworks. And there are a number of challenges ahead, and we cannot tackle them all today, but we're here today because of jobs. And what I want to highlight is that we have to make sure that we have the skills and the workers we need to not just deliver Europe's energy security, but to also deliver on climate goals and to get us to a net zero world. So what does it need? And I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to discuss further with a very distinguished panel later. 3 points. We need policy support to get enough skilled workers. So that's a call on member states that that they need to really look into upskilling and training programs, monitoring the uptake. And I'm also very happy to have Santina Bertolesi here today, because the new Solar Skills Partnership will play a major role, and it should be advanced with high priority. Second point, most jobs are created in the rooftop segment. You will hear about it later. And the rooftop mandates the European Commission just recently proposed will play an important role also when it comes to jobs. Therefore, this obligation to put solar on all European roofs should be broadened and include also all non-residential buildings and renovated ones. And the third point, we need to deliver on European solar manufacturing. That's a small percentage of jobs today, you will hear about it, but of strategic importance, and we should also make sure that we're getting manufacturing back to Europe. So to end with, the solar sector is also doing its share to address the skills challenge. I would like to invite you to join the launch of our Solar Works online job fair, the first of its kind, and the employment platform on the 1st of December. It is the first online solar recruitment platform, bringing together not just the future solar workers, but also solar recruiters and training providers. So please stay tuned. But now for the next roughly 1 hour, if you could have the agenda. I will hand over to Raffaele Rossi in a minute, Head of Market Intelligence of Solar Power Europe, to present to us the jobs report, and then we will have the panel discussion and also the presentation of the Solar Works job platform right after. A little bit of housekeeping. We, unfortunately, because of the very tight schedule, have no time for questions. But if there are any questions, please put them in the chat and we will be very happy to answer them afterwards. Before I'm handing over to Raffaele, let me just thank the whole team who have done an amazing job putting this report together. But now the floor is yours, Raffaele.
Okay, thank you, Walburga, and also good afternoon from my side to all the attendees to this webinar. So if we can move on to the next slide with the first slide of the presentation. Thank you very much. So let's get started. As a background, in the last few years, the solar market has exceeded quite a lot the expectations that many observers had, and solar has positioned itself as the fastest growing technologies, not only Europe, but also around the world. And this, I think, is no surprise to anybody. Demand for solar power in the European Union specifically has grown significantly last year, and it broke any previous records, despite the different current market conditions that were happening on several fronts. So with 27.9 gigawatts of solar capacity added in a single year, the market has grown 40% compared to 2020, marking an all-time high. And this surprising performance took place, as mentioned, in a year when still the negative effects of COVID-19 were still visible and therefore impacted the availability of PV products on the one hand, but also leading to price hikes. Now that we're getting closer to the end of 2022, we are confident that the EU solar market will break another installation record this year. And what the reason for that is that citizens and businesses are looking for a rapid and cost-competitive solution to protect them from skyrocketing energy and gas prices. So with this in light, the demand for solar power in all segments is higher than ever. And what is more, also the crucial role of solar in the EU energy transition has been reflected in the REPower EU strategy launched by the EU Commission in May 2022. And this is what Walburga just alluded to. The strategy, just as a recap, sets a target of about 750 gigawatts DC of solar capacity to be deployed in the EU by the end of this decade. And also a series of important accompanying measures that tackle existing challenges and foster solar deployment. So all in all, it is not really a surprise that policymakers put solar at the center of their energy transition strategies, because solar is not only the most versatile and cost-competitive energy technology in many regions across the world, but it is also the technology that creates the highest level of employment. So if you can move to the next slide, we have a nice graph from the IEA that outlines this performance. So I think most of us know very well the story of great performance of solar when it comes to cost and versatility, but the job friendliness dimension is often disregarded. But in fact, no other power technology is as job intense as solar, and it creates 2 to 6 times more jobs than any of its energy generation peer during the construction phase, according from the IEA data. So on the one hand, we have rooftop solar, which is somewhat more expensive than large-scale solar, but it is also much more job-intensive. And on the other hand, the utility-scale solar is more cost-effective than rooftop solar, and still it creates more jobs than any other energy source. So let's go 1 second through our methodology. First of all, the study that we present today illustrates the current and future job creation that are associated with solar power in the EU, based on historical data and the market scenario from our flagship report, the Global Market Outlook 2022 to 2026, which went out in May this year. In addition to that, it also provides a long-term outlook for solar job creation with a time frame to 2030. In order to do so, we used a hybrid approach to calculate the full-time equivalent jobs, so what we call FTEs. And that has been done looking at all 4 steps of the value chain. So manufacturing, deployment, operation and maintenance, and end of life. We have calculated direct jobs and indirect jobs, and those include the jobs resulting, for example, the work in process materials, as well as the logistic industry that are happening in the EU. So let's get to the key results of our study. So looking at the overall picture, jobs created by solar last year were 466,000, and that's about 200,000 FTEs coming from direct jobs. So that's 44% of the total, whereas the indirect jobs are 260,000. What's also important is that the great majority of jobs, which is roughly 80%, are associated with solar deployment activities. So everything connected to construction, procurement, engineering, and so on. And that accounts to 367,000 jobs. Second comes manufacturing and O&M jobs, which are at 9% each and provide 44,000 and 40,000 jobs respectively, while the decommissioning and recycling takes the remaining 3% share. The predominance of deployment jobs over O&M jobs is a consequence of the fact that, as you probably know, solar PV has a high CapEx intensity and a low OpEx intensity, which means that while it is very job intensive to put solar on rooftop and fields, once installed, little physical maintenance is needed. Moreover, the large growth of the capacity annually deployed in the EU last year explains quite well the reason why deployment jobs take the lion's share of total jobs. And by contrast, the commissioning and recycling jobs cover the smallest portion of total FTEs, and that's not really a surprise since the solar PV waste streams are still low in volume. So we will expect that to take place in the future and coming significant only from the 2030s onwards, when we will have the first larger wave of installed system in Europe reaching the end of their lifetime. Now, looking at the manufacturing jobs, you can see that manufacturing jobs are closely linked to the production capacities that are currently placed in the EU. And this figure shows manufacturing jobs on the left bar and production capacities on the right bars. In the EU, the industry has significant manufacturing capacities in certain steps of the value chain, and primarily for inverters, polysilicon, and to a minor extent also modules. But on the other hand, there is very little existing capacity for production of ingots and wafers on the one hand, and cells on the other hand. So it is really not a surprise that inverter manufacturing jobs provide the large majority of the jobs, with 31,000 jobs and 70% share. Then polysilicon production and module production also provide significant share, with 17 and 10% respectively, which is equal to 7,700 and 4,500 each. By contrast, one second to finish the picture there, due to the lack of production capacity for ingots and wafers and cells within the EU today, less than 1,000 jobs combined are created by those two activities. Now, moving on to the individual countries, our analysis shows that in 2021, Poland was the largest solar jobs provider with 113,000 FTEs and a 24% share. This might appear surprising to someone, considering that Poland is only the third largest market in the EU and is not really a large PV manufacturer. But there are several factors that explain this. So one key reason is that the majority of the market is constituted by residential rooftop systems, thanks to a favorable policy program that was discontinued in 2022. There are several rooftop installations at residential level that has been installed last year, and these installations are particularly jobs intensive. And then another important factor is that as an Eastern European country generates more indirect jobs than the other gigawatt scale markets. And this trend, by the way, is also visible in Greece, which stands at the top 5 when it comes to job creation, despite being the lowest in annual capacity among the 7 countries that are featured in this list. And other than that, the other players that come into this picture are not really surprises. They're all the major PV markets in Europe. So all the gigawatt markets, including Germany, Spain, Netherlands, and France, that all belong to this list. In 2021, also the majority of jobs stemmed from the rooftop PV segments, which provides 76% of total jobs. So this, as mentioned, is due to the fact that rooftop solar is more job intensive than utility scale solar. And this is also a trend that can be seen in most of the largest job contributors. So in Poland, as mentioned, the residential rooftop segment was driving the market. And so it's not a surprise that more than 90% of the jobs are connected to rooftop systems. Other large markets like Germany and the Netherlands are also dominated by these segments, which provide 77% of the solar jobs in both countries. And to complete the pictures, Spain and also to some extent France are exceptions to this trend because their markets focus on large-scale solar. However, even in a market led by utility scale like Spain's, rooftop solar still provides 44% of the total jobs. Now, looking at the prospects in the next slide, our analysis shows that since solar jobs are highly dependent on annual PV installation, the 20% growth in the EU market that we expect in 2022 will have positive repercussions on job creation. Our medium scenario forecast is based on a market growth to 34 gigawatts taking place this year and anticipates a 14% growth in solar employment for the current year, bringing the total jobs to 530,000 units. However, it's not really clear what will be the final market dimension this year. It could be up to 40 gigawatts in our high scenario. And if that becomes reality, we will see jobs increasing 30% to over 600,000 jobs. Now, stretching the moderate scenario to the end of the forecasting period, it is expected that the sector will employ 764,000 people by 2026, which is a 64% growth from 2021 levels. However, with an increased policy ambition leading to a higher development and improved energy independence, solar jobs could exceed 1 million FTEs in 2026. Although in an unlikely low scenario that anticipates limited market growth and continued dependence on global supply chain, solar jobs would only reach 540,000 jobs in 2026. Focusing a moment on manufacturing jobs in our prospects, the number of jobs creating manufacturing will greatly really depend on the success rate of the new Solar PV Industry Alliance led by the Commission and the achievement of the European Solar Initiative, which has the objective of establishing a minimum of 20 gigawatts of solar manufacturing in Europe across the supply chain. According to our medium scenario, whereby these targets for 2025 are only partially achieved, the manufacturing jobs reach 77,000 units by 2026, which is a 74% growth compared to 2021. In a low ambition scenario whereby EU manufacturing growth is limited, jobs only stand at 64,000 and a 46% growth. However, with the right political support to establish a strong manufacturing base in the EU, jobs could be as high as 106,000 FTEs by the same year, which is equal to a 141% increase from 2021. And it's important to notice also that those growth will take place in all value chain segments, including those that hardly contribute to EU employment today. Very quickly through the other segments, the activities in construction, procurement, installation, etc. of PV system are still expected to generate the majority of jobs. In 2022, we expect 419,000 jobs, which is a 14% raise, and to reach 574,000 units in the medium scenario by the end of the forecasting period. And unlike the deployment jobs, which really rely on the annual PV market and therefore are more susceptible to yearly fluctuation, O&M jobs are easier to predict and they're rather stable. Therefore, we do not expect major fluctuations in the deployment of these jobs. And under a medium scenario, we expect this 40,000 jobs in O&M in 2021 to grow to 47,000 in 2022 and reach 80,000 jobs in 2026. The prospects for the individual countries are portrayed in this graph, and it shows that we can see a rather different picture compared to today's values. Germany, which is expected to be the largest market by that year, is also poised to be ranked first in the provision of solar jobs in the EU, with 137,000 FTEs in the medium scenario. So will not only continue to retain the largest EU annual market until 2025, but also continue to operate the largest solar fleet and the largest manufacturing capacities across the value chain. On the other hand, Poland job creation will decrease after the exceptional performance that took place in the last 2 years, but the country will remain a major contributor to EU solar jobs with 662,000 FTEs, the medium scenario. And in addition to France, Spain, and the Netherlands, which are already in the top job contribution list, a surprise to some will be the presence of Romania in this top 7. We expect the Romanian market to reach the gigawatt scale by then, and a relevant share of rooftop PV system and the availability of labor cost compared to other EU markets of similar size will make it to join this group. So very quickly towards the outlook in 2030, we analyzed the size of the solar job market by that year under two scenarios. The first scenario is based on the REPowerEU strategy, which aims to reach 750 gigawatts by 2030. And this new target has increased the EU solar ambition considerably, with significant growth taking place from the 167 gigawatts that we have installed in Europe by the end of last year. Our modeling indicates that reaching the 2030 solar target will result in the creation of over 1 million direct and indirect jobs in the sector, more than doubling, therefore, the current employment levels. So, although the REPowerEU targets are certainly going in the right direction, in our point of view, the ambition still remains 26% lower than what could be achieved by the end of the decade by solar. And here we're referring to the 1 terawatt target that are accelerated high scenarios calling for. This target would enable the EU to stay aligned with a 1.5 degrees trajectory. And this would not only be cost efficient and more climate friendly, but would also lead to a large increase in employment opportunities for the sector. So under the 1 terawatt scenario, solar would employ about 1.5 million workers in 2030, which is 45% higher than in the REPowerEU scenario. So second last slide before drawing the conclusions, raising the ambition to 1 terawatt level translates into almost 500,000 additional solar jobs. And most of these extra jobs are in the deployment segment, which employs more than 1 million people by 2030 under this scenario. So this would be 50% higher than in the REPowerEU scenario. Also, the increase in cumulative installed capacity by 2030 means more O&M jobs, which are 34% higher than in the REPowerEU scenario. And our modeling assumes also that more solar demand brings more manufacturing capacity in the EU, increasing employment in manufacturing segment by 35% compared to REPowerEU. So just to sum up the conclusions of the study. Thank you. So in 2021, 466,000 people were employed by the solar sector in the EU, and the great majority are associated with solar deployment activities. Inverter manufacturing provides about 31,000 direct and indirect jobs, which is nearly 3/4 of total manufacturing jobs. Module and polysilicon production also provides significant shares, while the employment in ingot and wafer and cell production is low due to the lack of EU capacity today. The majority of the jobs stems from the job intensive rooftop PV segment, which provides 76% of total EU solar jobs. In the medium scenario, the market growth leads to 530,000 jobs in 2021 and 764,000 jobs in 2026, though with improved policy and market conditions, they could reach 1 million by that year. So to conclude with, under the REPowerEU scenario, solar jobs more than double compared to 2021, reaching 1 million FTEs in 2030. However, with a 1 terawatt solar target, jobs would be to about 1.5 million by the same year, which means 500,000 extra jobs in the EU. And with this, I have concluded my presentation. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague Michael for the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raffaele. Okay, in the following around about 30 minutes, I would like to discuss the results Raffaele has just presented with 3 distinguished guests. So first we have Santina Bertolessi, who is the Deputy Head of Unit in the Cabinet of Nicolas Schmit, the EU Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, who was also so nice and has written the foreword of this report. We have with us Jutta Paulus, a member of the European Parliament for the Green Party, who is, among many other activities, a member of ENVI, Committee for Environment, Public Health and Food Safety. And we have with us Julie Beaufy, who is the Secretary General of Europe-On, that's the Association of the Electrical Contractors in Europe, group very much needed in the solar sector, especially these days. Okay, so what I would like to focus on are our main 3 policy asks Walburga already mentioned in her introduction. So first topic was labor shortage, right? So I think energy prices and safety is a talk of town. I think a year ago, everyone was talking about Corona, family, neighbors, colleagues. That has changed. Now it's energy. And many of these people are looking into an obvious solution, and that's solar. We're happy about that. Solar alone, solar with storage. And now that the winter is coming, people also look obviously for electrical heating solutions like heat pumps or other devices. Caveat is that many of those who are trying to get their own solar systems today will be rather disappointed about the very long lead times. The key issue we highlight in this report is really lack of skilled labor. And so I think when thinking about that, it could really turn into a severe obstacle for the sector and slowing down solar deployment, similar to what we've seen in the past with first missing subsidies and then lengthy permitting, which is still haunting us. And so on the one hand, it's really great that the Commission has come up with this first solar strategy as part of REPowerEU. And just again, to emphasize that the ambition is to have already 400 gigawatt DC by 2025. That's basically a doubling of what we've installed by the end of that year. We had roughly 167 gigawatt installed 2021. This year, depending what we install, we will be around 200, and that we will have to double by 2025. So that's the medium, the intermediary target. And on the other hand, there's this huge shortage of experts to install and grid connect the systems, and we have that already today. So maybe let's start with you, Santina. So what's the Commission's strategy to solve this issue, and what's the role of this solar skills partnership?
Thanks to first of all, thanks to Valburga and to the friends of all the friends of Solar Power Europe for inviting for this interesting discussion. Also because we were underlining that the story we are discussing today is the positive story, a story which can bring about not only prosperity but also sustainability, and that is totally in line with our objectives on the European Green Deal. And then, of course, while discussing this, we cannot ignore that Russia's aggressions of Ukraine has reinforced the need for us to accelerate the transitions towards the renewables, energy security, coupled with the economic recovery. And here, what is the positive in the message we are giving today is that we are creating jobs, and we want to create quality jobs. That's why your report really comes in a time which is very important and topical, because it really shows the potentials that we have. And we know that the solar power will be key in contributing to the whole strategy towards the accelerations towards the renewable. And then the fact that according to your projections, and also partly with our studies, we can get to an additional 1 million jobs by 2030. It's a key issue, also with the view to answering, not only reaping the potential, but answering the fears that sometimes we hear associated with the climate transitions. While here we have a positive story, because here we are creating jobs, and we agree that the changes which need to be brought about while rolling out the solar photovoltaic and solar thermal technologies are basically not only on the technological development, as you said, the permitting, the regulatory one, or also creating the environment, but really having the necessary workforce and skilled workforce, in certain cases maybe totally reskilled on upskilled workforce. And this is also important because the positive impact in employment and social terms has to be looked at together with the fact that by moving towards solar energies or renewable energies, we also have the possibility to have affordable prices for consumers, for households in their energy consumptions. And you know very well that in the current circumstances, this is a key issue, but it will continue to be. We don't start from scratch. We came before, but it was adopted mainly some weeks after the REPowerEU. We had been working already before on the recommendation, the council recommendation on ensuring fair transitions. And a key approach in this recommendation was really to address member states to adopt policy package where employment creations and skills policy with a view to employment creations in the Green Deal transition was the objective. So as I said, there we have really put forward precise policy recommendations, and we have of course connected those policy recommendations in terms of skilling, reskilling, upskilling, active labor market policies, because sometimes it's necessary to have a transition from one sector to another sector, together also with possible financing support. And then REPowerEU, of course, has put forward, let's say, has really put forward the massive ambition towards the new solar strategy. And there we have also managed to streamline all these, not only in the policy packages that we had before, but also in the semester cycle. We have adopted an approach with our country reporting, in particular the country specific recommendations, whereby we have addressed member states towards investment in skills, so skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. And of course, looking at data you present in your study, and listening to both of you, it's clear that if we are meaningful, and if we are determined in achieving the potential of getting to the creation of at least getting it to 1 million jobs with a view to 2030, we know that we have to create the conditions where the jobs which are created are quality jobs, and this requires investment in skills, and it requires also effective and decent working conditions, adequate working conditions from the sector. Interesting to see that there is not only the deployment, but the manufacturing aspect, which has the potential of creating additional jobs in the coming years. And I think that this is very important to underline in terms of potential, because the fact that we create jobs with these new solar strategies and with the contribution, of course, of the industry, we do it and we create and we preserve economic activity locally. This contributes also to territorial and social cohesion. This contributes also to resilience of the EU as such. And that's another positive message that we need to underline. Now, focusing particularly on the skill gaps, we have been assessing the skill gaps already in a more systematic approach when already devising the IRF, the reaction to the COVID-19 crisis in a sector-specific manner. And the experience we have gathered so far and gained so far with the Pact for Skills, for instance, mentioning some sectors like the batteries where it's been successful, it will be key also to develop the proposed solar skills partnership. We think that there again, we don't start from scratch, and that we have to build on the models that have proved to be effective, involving the industry, the social partners, the local and national authorities, the training providers, as well as university, with a new approach to these continuous lifelong training, and especially when necessary upskilling and reskilling if workers need to shift from one sector to another. We are very much convinced that the EU Solar Industry Alliance that we have launched will be key in creating the opportunities, to matching the opportunities of the job creations with the effective deployment of skills policy, because we need to reskill and upskill precisely for the fields and the sectors that are necessary to the different regions of the EU. And it was interesting to see also how certain member states have already established a clear policy towards solar energy and photovoltaic, and with all the others that we have to bring into this. I think that is an important message that we are giving, is that again, we need to use the experience we have gained, and we need to fully implement not only the youth skills agenda, but the new opportunities we have. Of course, you might have noticed that last week, during the speech on the State of the Union, the President have announced that 2023 will be the European Year of Skills. This gives us further inputs to put forward or to maybe put even more systematically together all the actions that we have and we are planning in the fields of skills, knowing that it is also a key target that we have set in our strategy for implementing the social pillar. We have set these targets at European level, and member states have also set that targets at national levels. That's why we have to be consistent also in follow-up in this. And as I said before, we have the instrument of the social social skill aspect under the semester, which will need to be reinforced. Now, we think that we can use also this 23 to create more the need of skilling and upskilling, and the President of the Commission have highlighted with the right approach, where we skill the potential workforce with a view to match and create the enabling conditions for the businesses, the environment, and creation of the adequate workforce where it is needed. Of course, accelerating these investments in skilling requires a strong taking up by the member state, as I said, of course, by the industry, by the member state as well. And we are deploying not only the recovery and resilience plans, where actually REPowerEU should be integrating the objectives, but we are finalizing the partnership agreements on the ESF Plus and the cohesion funding. And I think that there we are really putting a lot of attention to the skills policy, and this will contribute to the objectives and the potential that you have just very well described. I think that we can also briefly touch upon what we have also, what the Commission has also adopted last week, and it is the emergency energy package. With, of course, in that regard, we are trying to put all the necessary tools in place with a view to address the consequences of the increasing energy prices and the fact that the war in Ukraine will only continue to worsen the situation. And we have tackled these, I think, with very important measures. We are not only putting forward actions to reduce demands, but we are putting forward and then, of course, at the later step, also change the design of the electricity markets. But we have introduced important measures such as the inframarginal technology capping and the windfall profits taxation. And here we will have also revenues created, and we have clearly said into this proposal that member states shall also use these revenues to address and mitigate the social consequences of the energy price increase. And we have households which are heavily affected, as well as business, but also to use such revenues to invest further in skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. So I think that we are showing that in all the measures we take, we have the challenge of the skilling clear in our mind, and we are trying to put forward the policy approach, the funding approach with the resources that we have at our disposal and we can collect. And there is the full engagement from not only from my commissioner, but also of the commission itself at large, and directly from the president of the commission. So I really would like to stress that, as I said at the beginning here, we have a positive story, a lot of potential, and I think that there is a common interest to work together. We count on the solar energy industry as one of key component of the profound transitions that we are creating and supporting in the EU in our countries, because it brings climate neutrality, because it brings energy independence, and this is really topical in this moment. But as I said, also it brings affordable energy prices, and this is an important paradigm. And all this has to be considered together with the fact that, as you said here, we have the potential of huge job creations, and I think that what we need to do is to continue to work together and create this, to work together to put in place the right measures, because, as I said, and we have learned at Back to Skills, this is a continuous and ongoing approach, and we need efforts of everybody to make it successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Antina. Jutta, how are you looking at that shortage? Are you happy with what the Commission is doing? Is the Solar Skills Partnership enough? What do we need to see actually to solve that as quickly as possible?
Yes, thank you very much for this very important report and for inviting me and giving me the floor. And I think most people that have followed this sector for a few years know, of course, that the majority of jobs are, of course, created in the vicinity, on the local level, so that the vast majority is really giving added value to the people in the European Union. Because I often heard the argument, you're creating jobs in China only. This is not true, because the people that put solar on the facades, on the roofs, of course they live here. They will not go enter a plane and fly back to China every night. So I think these numbers speak for themselves. When it comes to the skills partnership, well, I cannot judge anything that has just started, right? So maybe we could talk again next year in order to find out whether the plans of the Commission have worked. But I'm really glad that the Commission has taken this step, and that this really urgent problem has been taken up. I have had numerous discussions with let's call it the citizen energy community, who are also very aware that the bottleneck of solar deployment today is in fact skilled labor, skilled workforce jobs. And it's not only, at least in Germany, it's not only solar, it's all kinds of other businesses too, when it comes to deployment of heat pumps, when it comes to insulation of buildings, of everything that's got to do with the energy transition. But, and there's always a but to almost everything, we do have to keep in mind that the people that will, let's say, or the industry that will have to, or will inevitably shrink, of course, I'm not talking only of coal, but also of automotive, because a battery electric car is simpler to build than an internal combustion engine. We have to be aware that usually the jobs that are going to decrease are very, very highly paid jobs. And this is not necessarily the case when it comes to the jobs in solar. I'm very much afraid to say so, but I mean, it's true. So it's no use trying to hide this. So we have to find out a way how to make sure that we will not be painted as the ones that want people to be paid less or paid worse than they were paid before. I think that is really, really crucial, that we shouldn't make the mistake to say, well, it's just your own fault that you have studied to be an engineer. Had you been doing anything with your hands, you would be much better off. What we have also been talking about in the citizens' energy community, and maybe this is also because Germany is known as the country of the do-it-yourselfers. Actually, there are already citizen energy communities which have started to do like courses for people who say, I want solar panels on my roof, I'm ready to help. Because of course, the skill in actually deploying the panels and doing all the electric stuff, of course, that isn't anything I would give to whomever, but like installing the prerequisites, doing sort of helper work, that is something where I think everyone who is able to renovate their own flat from the inside would also be able to help there. So that is something that could be looked into. How could these informal jobs be fostered, like providing insurance, for example, if people are on the roof doing things where they might get hurt. So there could be insurance for this kind of thing when an energy community helps each other to deploy panels on their roofs. That would be an interesting thought, I believe. And then on the skills partnership, I remember that I was speaking with a member of the cabinet from DG Ener actually about the possibility to do a special Erasmus Plus on skilling workforce for the energy transition, because we still have a lot of people unemployed, especially in Southern Europe, and that is of course something where this could be a wonderful opportunity to bring skills and to bring money, and of course these people will come back to their home countries after being skilled in wherever, because we still thankfully have a lot of solar tourists in Germany, although the former government did their best to bring them out of their jobs. So that would be an opportunity to bring more skills, especially to those countries where solar can do the most effective job, so to speak. I have one further question. I mean, the cost of solar installations is going up right now due to the inflation, due to energy costs. How is this reflected in the study which you did? I didn't quite catch up on this. I'm not sure whether I'm correct that you more or less just looked at the prices from the past and sort of transpose them to the future, but I would be interested whether this would play a role also for the jobs that are needed or that can be done in the sector. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jutta. So I think we've updated the latest numbers, and I think in the long run we continue to believe that solar prices go down again. So I think that's just a short-term hike we're seeing actually because of supply chain issues that we're seeing, and in general, I think the cost curve will continue to go down for solar. So this is just a little blip we're seeing, which we see also in other industries, simply because of increased costs of raw materials, higher transport costs, and such things. So, but that's all reflected. Maybe to Julie. So your members are the ones everyone is looking for. So how can we make sure that they focus a bit more on solar than all the other job opportunities they have?
Thanks. I see the pressure is at the maximum height now. Yeah, so indeed, electrical contractors represent most of the segment on deployment that you mentioned, that Raffaele showed, is the one which is the biggest share and the most important here to ensure that we have enough solar energy for Europe to become more energy independent and so on. But what does it take for installers and electrical contractors to invest more in solar? I think that was your question. I mean, many and a big majority of our sector is already involved in solar deployment, solar installation. So it's not just that. I mean, of course, we can talk about upskilling the current workforce, but I think the most pressing issue is also to expand the workforce, so concretely train and hire more people, new people, fresh blood into the sector, and that's maybe where it's difficult because as we've said before, our segment relies a lot on technical education. We see that too few people go into technical education, and we see that everywhere across Europe. We already report vacancies in our sector nowadays, but obviously with the projections that you showed us, the concern is set to become worse and worse if there's no proportionate action to tackle this. So what do we need? I think that overall what we need is really concerted action from member states, as this was mentioned by Mrs. Bertolesi and Mrs. Paulus. You know, the competence on workforce and skills shortages first lies into member states. So we need national governments basically to really take the topic of jobs in the energy transition seriously, starting with technical education, because we often talk about engineers, we often talk about people with PhD for the energy transition. They are definitely needed also for solar, but the most massive share of workers will be into technical education, and we don't see, we see, I mean, some level of growth, but not fast enough to tackle the challenge. So we need more, you know, it depends from one country to the next. It can be more training facilities. It can be more attractive pays for teachers in technical education. It can be awareness campaign, because we need to start very early to make sure that people want to go into those local jobs, as Mrs. Paulus said, not only local, but also long-term jobs. So, you know, that's the kind of things which are happening little by little, but it takes still a lot of time. And maybe just to conclude on this first round, I think that things are starting to shift. So that's a bit of optimism from my side, because we saw last week very positive votes in the European Parliament on the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, where members of the European Parliament adopted more ambitious provisions for skills and workforce shortages. So thank you, Mrs. Paulus and your colleagues for the work here. And we also see 2023 being the European Year of Education and Training. I think that's a lot due to DG EMPL's influence. And so, you know, little by little, there's this awareness that green jobs are an opportunity for the energy transition, but also a threat if we don't bridge the gap. And I think it's coming together at the moment. What we expect from the EU is now to really increase pressure, support the Parliament's amendments in the Renewable Energy Directive and so on, so that member states really proportionate their action and emphasize technical education and the need to address job shortages in our sector.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Julie. The first answer round was a bit extensive, so we're running behind. So I think I would almost leave it here, but I think so maybe one question to Jutta or to regarding the two other policy ask topics we have. One is basically, of course, solar rooftops, which is the most job intensive part, not only within solar, but also within all energy generation sources. And I think an important tool here are the solar mandates that were mentioned in Repower EU. And actually, especially in Germany, we see several states, city-states are already having passed or already started implementing that. How helpful is that? How is that working? What do we have to see here? That's but very brief, maybe two, three sentences, and then once actually also a comment on industrialization. So how can we make sure that we also get manufacturing back? So I think we had it once, then support was cut. The first phase was over after 2012. I think we're through the deep valley. I think the installation-wise, it's only bright. How do we make sure actually that we get the industry back so that we also have not only installation jobs, which are important, but also industry jobs, that all these researchers that we have, these skilled, educated, studied people, how we can get them into production jobs. But very brief to both. Jutta, please.
Yes, thank you very much. On the mandate, actually, the experiences are mixed because, of course, there's this argument, building has become so expensive anyway, so you cannot force people to pay even more, and we need those houses, we need those flats, and the most important argument is indeed it slows up things, because I know of an example where a family wants to cover their roof with solar, and the opportunity is good because the scaffold would be there already, which of course would save cost. Yes, and then the solateur says, yes, okay, if you order tomorrow, I can promise you I can cover your roof in January. And they were like, oh, okay, we thought you would be coming next week, which was maybe a bit naive, I admit. Okay. But I think we are really fighting with the shortage of workforce and also of material. But in general, I feel that the public is rather in favor of having solar instead of wind, to be honest, which is due to, well, other reasons, let's put it like that. So we don't have so much difficulties on a political level. It's rather on the ground that it's more difficult than thought to actually get it going. On the second question on industrialization or bringing back also the industry, well, we don't have as deep pockets as the Americans do or as the Chinese do, apparently, because both these nations have deployed massive money in order to bring the industry to their country or to bring it back to the country, which is not happening in the European Union. We even are negotiating on whether it could maybe be a good idea to have an IPCEI on solar production in Europe, something which was very easily deployed for batteries and hydrogen. It's much more difficult for solar. But I think what we do have in our hands is that everyone is now talking about due diligence and about we don't want to have to do anything with forced labor. So there, of course, is an argument for reshoring production to regions where, let's say, the danger of encountering forced labor is much lower, which of course would be the EU as compared to, for example, China. So this is, of course, an opportunity. Also, I think we will see, or we will not see, very cheap fossil energy again, which will, of course, mean also that we will not see low shipping costs again. So, because if we have higher shipping costs, which of course comes with renewable fuels, then our local production will become more competitive. So I think that's really also an opportunity for us here in Europe to have more solar manufacturing here. But I really would urge the member states to have a look at their deep pockets and say, okay, this is a key industry, and we want it to be here in Europe. We want it to be deployed in our home country, in our home member state, and we will give them favorable conditions. And the second ask would be to DG Competition, because DG Competition is always very like, we have to be fair and everyone has to play by the same rules. Well, but unfortunately the Chinese and the US are not. And so we are in a global business, and I think in some terms we have to adapt to these global conditions. I'm not talking about human rights. I'm just talking about how do we support our own industry.
Okay, Jutta, thanks a lot. I think as we've seen, there's a lot of challenges, and that's why we've also called, where the tagline for this report is addressing the solar skills challenge. So thanks for the panel. We have one short presentation because we as the industry representative are not only asking the administration politicians to come up with solutions. We tried actually on our own. And my colleague Seen will talk about our new solar jobs platform and jobs fair, which we are going to launch very soon. Seen, the floor is yours.
Exactly, thanks. And I'll make it quick. I mean, it's obvious that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of jobs coming. But we all have the same remaining bottleneck. It's connecting people to the jobs. So that's why we're developing the Solar Jobs platform. Chiara, if you could skip to the next slide. And this job site won't be like any other job site, you know, where you just search the type of job, the job title that you're looking for, but we really want to match people according to their skills. So that's why we're setting up a skills algorithm. And when the job seeker create his profile, they list the skills that they have, both soft skills and hard skills. And then we match their skills with the skills that the companies are actually looking for to just show that there's a job for everyone in solar, and there's probably a job for them with the skills that they have. And although, of course, the goal is to get a lot of people into the sector, to inspire them to go into the sector, it's also clear that there's still the skills gap. And so that's why we also want to motivate people to learn new skills and to follow upskilling and reskilling courses. Especially, like Julie said, we need more people into the technical education. And so that's why it was important for us to also include training providers and educational institutions in there. So when a job seeker is looking at a job at the platform, but they are missing some skills that the job is looking for, there's actually suggested trainings there where they can learn those skills. And we'll have a broad range of courses there, from like, you know, long-term renewables and masters in renewable energy to a short online training on project management, but also PV installation courses. We really want a lot of trainings on there. And if you go to the next slide, you can see a sneak peek of what the website will look like, and where we identify just on the homepage who you are, if you're a job seeker, a company, or a school. And on the next slide, you can see then an example of what the job seeker sees when they are missing skills. The trainings are suggested there. And this platform will be launched on the 1st of December, which is when we're hosting the first online solar jobs fair. And that's the next slide, Chiara. So that's an online exhibition where we're again connecting solar companies to job seekers. So if you often are looking for new people in your company, it's a great opportunity to position yourselves. So do get in touch if you are interested. And so we're launching the platform on that date, but you will definitely hear from us before that. Because obviously when we get job seekers on there, we want there to be a lot of jobs and a lot of trainings. So do stay tuned, because we're looking forward to finding new people and getting new people in the sector soon. And now I give the word to Alberga again.
Thanks a lot, Seen. My job now is to wrap up the presentations and the discussion. We have shown with our second job report that there are great opportunities out there, providing hundreds of thousands of clean jobs, and as it was underlined by Jutta, also once again, local jobs in very uncertain times in our sector. The backside of the coin is that we also need to make sure that we have these skilled workers, the skills and the workers, and that's really a major challenge ahead. What I took from the discussion is that we see some positive signals of action on different levels in order to overcome the challenge. It was very great to hear from Santina that Commissioner Schmidt and also Ursula von der Leyen and the whole college of commissioners are fully committed to support our sector and also other sectors in this challenge, because we are not the only ones. I noted that 2023 will be a very special year, as Ursula von der Leyen mentioned in her State of the Union speech, which is focusing on education and on skills. Concerted action of the EU and member states is incredibly important. We still need to do a lot to make technical education more attractive. We need to really up value the job of installers and other technical profiles. So my last words are that I would like to very much thank the distinguished guests, our panelists, Santina Bertolesi, Jutta Paulus, and Julie Burfis. Thanks very much for the interesting insights you shared with us. I would like to ask all of you who joined us to mark your agendas for the 1st of December, where we are going to launch our SolarWorks platform and where we're going to hold our SolarWorks trade fair. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope to see you back in one of our next webinars. Bye-bye. Have a nice afternoon.